In this series, we speak to inspirational people who are working in global health. They share their journeys about where in the world they have worked, the issues they are passionate about, and how they got involved. Whether they are students, young professionals, or established in their careers, they all have one thing in common: to change this world for the better. In this episode, pharmacist and motivational speaker Jack Kavanagh speaks to us from the heart. He talks about diversability, what motivates him to inspire others, how he responded to being cast off his path at just 20 years of age after a serious injury, and how he applies his own version of magic to motivate others.
I think this is my way of humanizing things. Disability implies lack. That's something that I've really struggled with because I see both sides of the fence. What people perceive as a before where I was able-bodied and maybe an after where I was disabled. The thing that disables me is the environment. It's actually the environment physically, the environment socially, the environment culturally, the environment between my two ears at different times. They're the things that are disabling. It's not necessarily anything else.
Jack Kavanagh sustained a spinal cord injury in 2012, only weeks before entering his second year of pharmacy in Trinity College, Dublin. As a result, he is paralysed from the armpits down with 15% muscle function. This did not deter him from achieving success in his very full life. Through talks and workshops, Jack inspires many as he speaks about the concepts of resilience, personal leadership, the power of choice, and personal development. So welcome everybody. Today I'm absolutely delighted. I have the privilege of being here for a conversation and welcoming Jack Kavanagh to our show. You are so welcome, Jack.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm privileged to be here. Really delighted.
So Jack, you have such an incredible and inspiring story. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about just about your background and maybe a little bit about where you were in your early teens, what you were thinking about doing when you were a young man, and how that worked out.
Absolutely. So I just might caveat it by saying I think it's very kind of you to say that, but everybody has an interesting story when we delve into it, and so happy to share a little bit of my journey. Um, I suppose when I was a young teenager, I was in a boarding school, and what got me to a boarding school was a real interest in Harry Potter, actually. So I was severely dyslexic when I was younger, and some diligent care and attention from a number of teachers really helped me to learn to apply myself. And as I did, Harry Potter was a big thing. And so that was the place where I applied my reading trade, and Harry Potter led me to deciding to go to a boarding school. So I spent 6 years in a boarding school with 400 other guys, and during those years, you go through the ups and downs and the peaks and troughs that so many of us go through, and the questioning, and but I had overall a really great time. There was times when I was bullied and times when probably wasn't the kindest to others, and you really start to develop and learn about yourself. Um, I, in contrast to my younger self, became quite diligent actually, and really applied myself, and that was really facilitated by having a balance of outlets. And what I mean by that is a nice balance between like schoolwork and applying myself there, but also having the extracurricular of I love to run. I played a lot of rugby. At out half was my position, and they taught me different things. Running taught me what it was to be alone with my own thoughts, and push myself as an individual. Rugby taught me what it was to work as a team towards a shared objective. But I also discovered windsurfing during those years, which was a big joy and a passion of mine, where I really found flow. And I would spend my summers training to be an instructor, and then worked down the west for a couple of summers as a lifeguard and a windsurfing instructor. And that was a really special experience for me. It was kind of where I found my tribe in the wilds of the west of Ireland on the beach every day. And what better way to spend your summers? And during those years of sort of transitioning from secondary towards college, I realized that I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I had interest in people, and I loved communicating and being with people, and I was interested in science and health and well-being as well. And so medicine ended up as my first six choices, and I didn't really think about what should go down after that because I was going for points, and sure, that was it. And I ended up studying science um, for 4 weeks in college, which is what I got. And I realized there's something missing here, and it's the people. And the only thing that I hadn't considered was in the prospectus was pharmacy because my dad's a pharmacist. And now my dad is one of my best mates, but I said, you have to do your own thing. And checked out the prospectus and realized, wow, um, people and science, that's a pretty good match. And when I actually made the transition, a place came up in the pharmacy course. I had the required entry requirements, and I made the transition, and I felt really great about that in myself, and I was proud and excited to be a healthcare professional. And just before I went into my second year in college, a pivotal part of my life happened where on the first day of a holiday at the end of the summer, just before going back into college, I was away with seven of my friends in Portugal, and I ran down a beach, dived into the water over a wave, not really realizing how shallow it was, and my head collided with the sandbank, and in that moment I broke my neck. And for anyone that's familiar with anatomy, I broke it at the fifth vertebrae down from my skull, and C5, and what that really means in a spinal cord injury, and every injury is different, but what it meant for me is that I have about 15% muscle function. I was dependent on a ventilator for the guts of 2 months. Um, I woke up the following day in traction, my head in a metal cage, tubes going in everywhere really to keep me alive, and over time I would reclaim about 15% muscle function. So practically what that is my shoulders, my biceps and wrists. So I have no movement from the armpits down. I have no finger function, and to a certain degree, it influences most or has an impact on most of the body systems. Um, so, having done a year of a health science, and having trained as a lifeguard, I was quite aware of what this might mean for me. And in the weeks after the injury, I was in intensive care in Portugal and was air ambulanced home. And what was very interesting for me was as a young man, I was 20 at the time, really just asserting who I was in the world and starting to get a strong sense of that. I found myself with the rug completely pulled out from under me and in the position that uh, so many of the case studies in college were about, where now I was the patient. And uh, what I found myself often being very grateful for is that I had the language to speak to the other healthcare professionals and to challenge and ask questions, because what I realized in there is that often people see the patient but they don't see the person, and that was a big learning curve for me.
Wow, Jack, what an experience at just 20 years of age. I mean, what an experience, and what a different track for your life to move on than what you had thought. Um, and what you're saying there about being, you're studying the health system, and then there you are, a patient, a recipient of care. I mean, what was that like practically? What was that like? And what was the care like? What was the health system like? And how did you survive that?
I think survive is a good word for the initial stages. Um, but you say what was the how did I get through it? Yeah, survival was the initial piece. I was very fortunate that I had family and friends that were in a position to be very supportive and were. Um, More than that, I think what helped was that I was open to it. Um, I was very transparent with where I was at. A friend of mine took his own life around the time, only a couple of months after my injury, and it was very unrelated, totally unrelated. But when I saw, and he was an idol of mine, and when I saw where people could so easily go to, um, I decided that I would be transparent with my journey because it would me being transparent for others might give others hope or a lens into another's life that would in some way be beneficial, hopeful, or inspiring. And my experience of the healthcare system was fantastic. Healthcare professionals or people that are involved in any way with health, they go into it for the right reasons. At different times in different ways, I think people get disenfranchised by the system or by teams, as is the case in any job, by management, and so on, or maybe feeling stifled by the extent to which they can use the scope of their practice or explore the scope of their practice. But I think people go into it for fundamentally the right reason. And something that I've been really trying to hold on to in years gone by is that looking at life from the approach that people are fundamentally trying to do their best regardless. And so I had a really good experience of the healthcare system. What I think rehab can't prepare you for is the real world. It can maybe take you to baseline, but how somebody functions and progresses and heals in the absence of cure, which is a huge idea I think we need to explore more in health, is healing in the absence of cure. Um, but the journey that people go on when we leave is something that we have very little control over. And so I was lucky that I had the know-how and importantly the support for when I couldn't implement what I knew, when I wasn't there within myself. So that's a small insight.
Mm. Well, it's a small part of a very large insight, I would say, Jack. I've also from then I see that your world is very big. You have you've gone on. That's only is that 9 years or something? It's only 9 years since that happened, and you're a coach. You're studying again at the moment in RCSI. I want to ask you a little bit about that. You've traveled in the States. You are a speaker, a motivational speaker, and no doubt involved. You've got your fingers involved in many pies. What did you decide, after you kind of picked yourself back up and gently put yourself, the new version of you, back together? How did you decide, okay, what am I going to do with my life now? And what were the things that came towards you that pulled you?
Wow, I think I'm still trying to figure that one out. So one of the biggest, most pivotal things that happened was, um, not long after I weaned off the ventilator, I was lying in the bed in the step down unit, and my family were there. And we decided that a worthy and meaningful goal would be to get back to college the next year. Now, that was quite a stretch from literally just having learned to breathe again. And look, call it serendipity, call it what you will, but about 5 minutes later, my tutor from college walked in, and that was kind of the beginnings of me putting steps in place to get back to college to study as a pharmacist. And getting back to college was really so that I could be in a supported environment, that I could bump up against things and fall over, literally and metaphorically, and that I'd be in a place where I was supported as I meandered, and came to terms with, and learned to adapt to my new scenario. Over the years, when I got into college, we talked about survival. It was very much that at the beginning. People saw me back in college 13 months later, and thought it was a big success story. And it was in many ways, but the reality was very challenging. I had nothing figured out. At the time, it was taking me 3 hours and the assistance of two people just to get up in the morning. Like, I really had nothing figured out. I've come a long way since then. But what was remarkable actually was being so far outside my comfort zone, being so uh, yeah, so far outside my comfort zone. I really had to stretch myself to understand how can I minimize the impacts of this injury on my day so that I can be effective and do the things that I really am passionate about. And over time, I got interested in social entrepreneurship in college. I got involved with societies. We started challenging all the things I was told I would never do again. Traveling internationally, getting back driving independently, finding equipment that could get me back into the sand dunes and on the beaches and through the forest trails. And so now I do off-road hand cycling and getting my body into a position where I was healthy enough to do some of those things. Doing silly things like jumping out of a plane with a parachute, um, and so on. And over the years, little by little, I was kind of challenging some of the limitations or my own perceived limitations. And when I reflected through my time in college, I was learning. I was just studying a healthcare uh, degree, and what I was finding was it was all the little lifestyle practices that I had turned to, that I had delved into. It was the coaching world and facilitation world that I had needed to explore for myself, just to get through that time. Um, they were some of the things that really helped me the most. They were the things that took me from a place of illness, of being unwell, onto a journey of well-being and wellness. And a phrase I used earlier was healing as best I could in the absence of a complete cure. And that looked at my mental health, it looked at my emotional health, it looked at my physical and spiritual health. And I kind of had to embrace different practices under all of those things, whilst studying the traditional um, healthcare degree. So over the years, I have found different ways to explore and integrate those things into the work I do, be it with organizations or young people or clients in the pharmacy.
Hmm. And Jack, I heard you say there, you were talking about, the limitations, and then you cut yourself and you said, my perceived limitations. And I just want to, I know we were chatting a little bit about well-being and about working on thoughts and thinking. And I know that you're just at the moment in the middle of writing your dissertation with your diploma in positive health and positive psychology with RCSI. So can you tell us a little bit about what have you learned? And obviously you had your own experience coming into that course, and then you learned some more of the theory, but what are the things the nuggets that you have learned from that course?
Yeah, well, I suppose that course really looks at the proactive side of health. I think so much of what we get trained for as healthcare professionals is actually the management of dis-ease. And I say not disease, but dis-ease in all its forms. And so I was very much on the proactive side of health. Like, okay, we need to manage that stuff, but how can we take people on the journey to wellness as well? And this course looks at some of the science of well-being. We look at contemplative practices, different forms of meditation and mindfulness. They are different. Um, and how do we have like an appropriate contemplative practice for different maladies, you might say, or different scenarios. We look at the lessons of positive psychology, and I think positive psychology gets a bad rap, and I don't really like the name either, because realistically, nobody is happy, clappy, positive all the time, nor should they be. Um, but what falls under the remit of positive psychology is that traditional psychology looked at how do we take people from mental ill health back to baseline. Positive psychology looks at how can we bring people from baseline more to a place of well-being or flourishing, because health is not necessarily the absence of disease. Um, and so that's what it looks at. And so it looks at things, elements of our psychology that really instill hope and meaning and purpose, things that look at what are the things that contribute to resilience, what are the things that really help us to thrive in different ways in our work and in our personal lives. The course also looks at positive organizational scholarship. So, how can we set up our workplaces and our organizations so that they're good for the triple bottom line, they call it. So, that they're good for people, they're good for planet, and they're good for profit. And that's a hard nugget to crack, but it's an important one to crack as we go forward into the next decades. And so much of the course is really targeted around our personal management of ourselves. And I think in any health practice, that's where it starts. We can get disenfranchised with the world around us, but I think it was Gandhi says we have to be the change ourselves. And that's easier said than done. And a big part of that is being compassionate with our imperfection on that journey. And so being compassionate with when we fall short, and having the courage to get back up again and get back on the path. So there's some of the things that we're exploring. We look at coaching for wellness. We look at positive organizational scholarship. We look at the meditative practices. We look at going from integrating the lifestyle practices that can challenge so many of the maladies or the non-communicable diseases such as cancers and respiratory diseases and the likes of diabetes and cardiovascular diseases that are such a drain on our healthcare systems and on the health of so many people around the world.
Mm.
And so I think it's an approach that more healthcare professionals, people around the world, you don't need to be a health professional to teach or to share or to integrate this stuff into your life.
No, no. And even, health professional, I mean, we experience health, whether it's, good health, whether we're not in good health, we're all health professionals. We're professionals of our own health, for sure.
Absolutely.
I want to ask you one question. You use the term, which I think is amazing, diversability. So moving away in this health space, in global health, we talk a lot about disability. You talk about diversability. Can you just tell us what is that and why do you use that term?
Yeah, well, I think this is my way of humanizing things. Disability implies lack. That's something that I've really struggled with because I see both sides of the fence. What people perceive as a before where I was able-bodied and maybe an after where I was disabled. The thing that disables me is the environment. It's actually the environment physically, the environment socially, the environment culturally, the environment between my two ears at different times. They're the things that are disabling. It's not necessarily anything else. And so, what I encourage people to consider is that any one of us on any given day is somewhere on the spectrum of our own ability. Depending on the quality of the sleep you've had last night, depending on the technology you've got access to, depending on the team you're a part of, depending on the culture or the legal system in the country that you're in, any number of different things. Infiltrate the extent to which or play into the extent to which our ability or our potential is facilitated or put us in a position to be effective or perform well in our lives. And so I think when we consider that today the fact that I had a bit of a tiff with my spouse on the way out the door, or that the kids are screaming inside as I try to attend my work meeting on Zoom, or the fact that I don't have adequate supplies of the vaccine, and people are banging down my door, whatever it might be. Um, these are the kind of things that influence any person's ability, and I find it to be a more humanizing way of thinking about it. And certainly, from my perspective, it takes us away from the mentality of anything being lacking in any individual, and allows us to see them as a more whole human being, and maybe to focus a little bit more on what is there, what's generative, what's good, and the abilities that they do have.
Yeah, language is so important. Thank you for that, and just a wonderful term, really, really wonderful. Just as we come to the end, I'd love to ask you a question. You started off talking about how Harry Potter inspired you, and as I've been listening to you, I've been, thinking of you as Harry Potter, and then I've been thinking of you as Dumbledore, and I'm thinking of you as a hybrid of the two. And for the young people that are listening, do you have any, a piece of advice or a piece of wisdom that you would love to leave with them? These could be young people who are interested in studying or experiencing getting involved in global health. And you could put your Dumbledore or your Harry Potter hat on it.
Yeah, well, I suppose the analogy would have to relate to magic, so wouldn't it? Um, um, and you know, the simple thing that I would say is that um, we all get cast off our path, the path that we think that we should be on, and that can be really challenging to come to terms with. Um, but I think that where the magic really comes is first of all embracing where we are and following uh, the quiet voice in the back of your head that's pointing you to where you need to go next. Um, for anybody that's interested in being involved in health, be it locally, be it in your own health first and foremost, be it locally, in your community, in your country, or at a global level, I would say regularly tune back into why you started on that journey when you become disenfranchised. Um, I know I became disenfranchised at different points when I became overwhelmed by the scale of some of the challenges that we're faced with. But tune back in to that why, and tune back into the person that's in front of you, because the impact that you can make on that person spreads a ripple outward, and that's where magic begins and ends, and moves to and from.
Wow, Jack. Well, thank you for spreading your magic. Thank you for the ripples that you're only even just beginning to make in the world. We're watching this space, watching all of the incredible things that you're going to do. And thank you so much. It's been so much more than a privilege. Thank you.
Oh, the privilege and honor has been all mine. So keep doing what you're doing. You're doing amazing work.
So thank you for joining us today. If you want to know more or get involved in the Irish Global Health Network, then go to our website. You can sign up for free to become a member at www.globalhealth.ie. And we very much look forward to the next episode.